Hello and welcome to the OnStage Colorado Podcast. I'm Alex Miller here once again with arts reporter Toni Tresca on a Monday morning here, September 16th. Hey, Toni.
Hey there, Alex. It's a pleasure to be here with you on this Monday morning after another busy weekend at the theater.
Really busy week, starting on, I guess, Thursday. But anyway, so in this episode, we will unpack the shows we've seen and discuss whether you should check them out. And later we'll do our Colorado headliners, our weekly top 10 roundup of shows that look to be a good bet. And then we're going to get to an interview that you did, Toni, with Jenn Zuko of Blue Dime Cabaret. Can you tease that one a little bit?
Yeah, so Jenn was a great interview. She was super open to talking all about Blue Dime's existence since 2018. We discussed what it means to be a pop-up cabaret company, where all they've performed, what exactly the group's name means, and we even briefly touch on the closure of DB8, which was Boulder's only queer bar and Blue Dime's temporary home, and how they've pivoted now back to their roots of being a nomadic company.
Okay, well, that sounds like a cool conversation. So, be sure to stick around for that discussion just a little bit later in the podcast. So now let's talk about what we've been seeing around Colorado. Toni, what did you catch this weekend? Of course, we overlapped at a couple of shows.
Yeah, so my weekend overlapped with yours. I saw the opening night of The Critic at Buntport Theater in Denver by 1023 Productions. So this is a new Colorado company. This was their first fully produced play, and it was about a local theater troupe who begins freaking out when they get word when their local theater critic is coming to attend their opening night of the show. And so they start making all these changes. And you and I reviewed that one for the site together. We did a dual review.
Yeah, that was really cool. We went to a bar after the show and just kind of chatted about it, and then put up basically the transcript of our conversation. So that one's up now. We definitely thought it was a worthy effort. The script didn't quite feel like it was ready for prime time, but
there were some good one-liners in there too. Just about the everything from Cats to like the state of theater criticism today, and what shows win awards and whatnot. But it was a tad bit repetitive, so hoping to see maybe some refinements on that script. But it's a fun chance to see an early play within a play kind of meta theatrical text.
Yep. And then we went out to Rise Comedy on Saturday night and kind of did a little marathon. What did you think of all those improv shows?
There were some good ones in there. So we ended up seeing 4 shows. So we got there at 6:00 and we stayed through there through about 11, or
10. Yeah,
through 10. We stayed through 10. And so we watched 4 shows in a row. There was about 7 teams who we ended up seeing, and it's a mixed bag with improv, as you know. They're making it up all on the spot. So there was some good improv, and there were a couple of teams who were not quite as strong, particularly in the last act that we saw. It was dynamic duos, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if the teams totally lived up to that name.
Yeah. So we'll have our take on our night at Rise Comedy, but overall, fun time. Definitely recommend going out there. It's nice because you've got a little bit of flexibility. You can stay for 1 show or 2 shows, and I think they don't charge for the second one. So if you go to 1, the next one you can take in as well, right?
That's right.
And a good bar. So I also saw Run for Your Wife. Went up to Conifer and saw that one, Sharkbox Theater production at Stage Door Theater. So I think Sharkbox, they lost the site that or the venue that they were working at it before. I'm not sure what that one was. So now they apparently have some kind of agreement with Stage Door for now. And that was a good show. It was very funny. It's a kind of a classic farce about a bigamist and how he's juggling his 2 wives. The only thing that I kind of, it had a lot of dated gay humor, gay jokes, some stuff that, kind of borders on offensive depending on where you're coming from, like limp wrist caricatures and things like that. So this is a play from the 80s, and it showed its age a little bit. But, kind of similar to a lot of farces with lots of slamming doors and running around and mistaken identity, this, that, and that kind of stuff. So, it was still pretty funny. I also, yesterday, Sunday, I went to the matinee of Bad Jews at Wheat Ridge Theater Company. So it was during the Broncos game. So there weren't a lot of people here. But good show, really good production, directed by Selena Namoff there. And it's an intense show. I saw it from the Edge Theater back in 2017. And it's long enough ago that I didn't remember it that well. So, but pretty solid production. So I'll have a review of that on the site here pretty soon. So,
I'm glad to hear that show was good.
Yeah. So that's what we've seen this week. Anything in the mailbag?
No new reviews to share this week, but we did get a couple of comments. So the first one was on our TikTok account from Leslie Loudspeaker, aka the Arvada Center's communication and PR specialist, Leslie Simon, who commented on your TikTok review of Waitress, saying, "Glad y'all had a great time. Oh, how I laughed and cried." So just an acknowledgement of the impressive work that is going on at the Arvada Center with Waitress over there.
But yeah, we've been having fun with doing TikTok videos, and I'm a little bit surprised by how many views they're getting.
Yeah, I know. We both did them this weekend. You did one for Run for Your Wife, and I did one for The Critic, and they both racked up a couple hundred views, which has been really, really exciting. So catch us on TikTok.
Yeah, and we're also putting those on Instagram, too.
We also heard from friend of the podcast, Kevin Douglas, who is one of the co-founders of 2 Cent Lion Theater Company, which is a theater troupe here based in Denver, who reached out after last week's conversation with Julia Toby to say, "I love this week's episode, especially the marketing advice and Julia's slogan, 'Confuse 'em, you lose 'em.' Effective social media campaigns and local business partnerships are crucial, especially for newer companies who haven't built a loyal audience yet. Would love to see more of this from the bigger theaters around Denver. How cool would it be to convert those track night clubbers Julia mentioned into curious season ticket holders? Warmest regards, Kevin." P.S. Let Julia know that some of her tips for Hedwig certainly gave me ideas for Rocky Horror at 2 Cent Lion. And ask her as a friend not to sue me for intellectual property theft. So, Julia, please don't sue Kevin.
Anything else?
Cool. Yeah, we did. We got one final message, which came from Meg Ralph in response to our podcast episode from last week, September 10th, titled "A Way Forward for Colorado Theater," in which we interviewed Julia Toby. Meg Ralph commented, "Cool, are you guys going to get Vintage's side of the story, or are we only interested in the spin?" And this comment was in regard to our conversation around the cancellation of Murder for Two at Vintage, in which Julia told us on the pod that her contract was not honored and communication was disrespectful and counterproductive.
Yeah, so I saw that comment on the site and let her know we had reached out to Vintage Theater for a response. So do you have any update on that, Toni?
I do. I just heard from Bernie Cardell, the artistic director over there this morning, and he said his comment on the situation was that, and I quote, "The whole situation is just sad. We disagree on Julia's characterization. This is a situation of expectations not being clearly laid out clearly between the two co-producing companies. When communication is not clear, issues come up."
Yeah, it sounds like a messy situation, but I think we've covered it well enough. What did Bernie have any thoughts about John Orr's piece about the future of theater?
Yeah, he did. Bernie said, "Despite this current situation, I do think partnerships are the future. If we can work together as a community, success is guaranteed." So this is kind of just referring to the resource sharing that is able to happen when you do work in partnerships. But I guess there is also, when you work together, there is also that chance for clash and things to go poorly. But their upcoming shows seem to reflect their commitment to partnership, which include a collaboration with Insight Collab on She Kills Monsters in January 2025, and its ongoing cabaret series with local artists and theater companies.
On a positive side, so they Vintage was doing had pretty good run with Kirsten Dahl's world premiere of Della Doucette. So they extended that run through the end of September to the 29th, and they're replacing Murder for Two with another murdery kind of show with Murderers, directed by Bernie Cardell, and that'll be running October 18th through November 17th. And they're also bringing back Eleanor by Mark St. Germain, which stars Deborah Persoff, and which is all about Eleanor Roosevelt, that really did well the last time they had it. So that'll be October 14th through November 4th on their cabaret stage.
Yeah, and John Moore highlighted this situation at Vintage's changes to its schedule in his weekly arts news roundup for the Denver Gazette this week.
Speaking of John, he put out a Facebook, which he occasionally do. He'll throw out a comment. He has a pretty good following, so he gets a lot of people to respond. He was just talking about an actor friend who had gotten a negative review and that she thought was particularly kind of nasty, and he agreed, and so he was just asking people like what did they think of this, and what do they think about reviews in general. I think there were over 100 comments or so.
Yeah, there was 122 comments to date as of when we're recording this on Monday morning around 9 a.m. So probably still more to come. But I really think that the outpouring of comments shows just how much this really struck a nerve. And John also kind of gave some of his own advice, including just one opinion, consider the source, and just pointing out that if you believe the good reviews, you also kind of have to believe the bad reviews. But I thought it was an interesting call to just ask the community what they think about receiving an unexpected, stinging review in 2024. What did you think of John's post, and what comments kind of stuck out to you, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely thought it was interesting. Of course, as a theater reviewer myself, and thinking about but also, I mean, I always come to it from the point of view of I want to say as much good about this piece as possible, but I'm not going to whitewash it. If there are things that aren't so great. So, we do hear all the time from theater folks about how grateful they are for anyone coming out to review their work. So from my point of view, they do need to be able to handle negative reactions if they're going to, charge for tickets and be in the public eye, which I think most people understand. They just don't, we don't want to hear. They don't want to hear something nasty. We sometimes hear that we're too nice at times, that we should be more critical. So, it's a balancing act. If something's not great, it's not really it's a disservice not only to our readers, but for the creators. If all they ever hear is that their stuff is fantastic, they're less likely to improve. Then somebody who reads a great review about a show that really wasn't that great, and they go to it and pay for tickets, they're gonna be like, what the hell? So. But the other comment that I did like for theater creators, I think Jeffrey Kent's idea to have a reviewer buddy to screen reviews is a great idea. So, whether it's your, a friend or family member, hey, if there's a review, just would you read this? And if it's positive, let me know. If it's not, I'll wait until the run's over or never not read it at all, because it can really, I think it can kind of, depending on how thick or thin your skin is, it really can, affect how you think about yourself. And nobody wants to have that kind of stuff going on while they're, trying
that was kind of
get through the run.
That was kind of a reoccurring theme in the actual thread itself, was that a lot of performers and directors mentioned that they wait until after the run is over to read any of the reviews, if they do at all, which I think makes sense. And we've heard from the DCPA that it's their policy not to share or discuss reviews at all until the run is over. So they don't share them on their accounts or anything like that, which is interesting. But that's kind of their policy, to just not engage.
Yeah. Yeah. Personally, I don't think I could resist reading it. The only time I ever had a negative review was in a show that I was directing quite a while ago at the Backstage Theater. And one reviewer, I think his name was John Moore, at the Denver Post, had made a comment
I've heard of him.
that the director looked like he had abandoned the actor who was in the lead role. And I was like, oh man, that's so not true, because I worked so hard with this actor. And it was one of those times when I just couldn't find somebody, that I really loved to be in the part. But anyway, it just, it's definitely served to, I never forgot that, just because, you really do have to be really careful about, what you say, and make sure that it's, that you're talking about the performance, not the person. There were some interesting things where reviewers had mentioned like an actor's appearance or weight or things like that, which, I don't usually touch that. Occasionally it's relevant, but I would certainly never say, something that would hurt somebody's feelings.
Yeah, I think this thread was just an important reminder to me, as somebody who also does do theater criticism, to really be careful about those words that you choose when you are writing, because you don't you're writing for a general audience, but the only people that you're absolutely really 100% certain are probably going to read it are the creative team who are actually working on the show. That was a piece of advice I got from another theater critic early on. And so I just really put that back in perspective. I quite liked actor-director Jonathan Underwood's comment that there are a lot of ways to be honest without being venomous, which I think is that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to our main topic today. So this week, we are going to go over the evolution of immersive theater in Denver. You know, we've touched on this before and kind of talked about how it's really interesting how many of these types of shows we're seeing around. And so, Toni, you just published not one, but two pieces in Denver Westword about the immersive scene. So you had a story in the Fall Arts Guide focused on what immersive is, you know, why Denver's become this kind of epicenter and the future of the scene. And then you wrote another article about DCPA's off-center plans to switch to producing original shows every other year. Its plans to tour all future work, kicking off this holiday season with the usual Camp Christmas, and its plan to find a permanent home for its immersive work. So what kind of prompted you to write about immersive theater?
Yeah, so I originally pitched just one piece as kind of this exploration of buzzword versus thriving art form to unpack immersive theater, because I've been seeing more and more companies kind of just use the word immersive in their marketing materials, either in the press release or they're kind of in their Instagram or other social media posts are marketing their thing as immersive, but it really wasn't. I was actually kind of prompted by seeing Cruel Intentions by Shifted Lens Theater Company in Aurora at the People's Building, which was actually a really well done production, but it was marketed as being an immersive musical. And after seeing it, it really wasn't. There was at the beginning of the show, you could pick up telephones, and they gave you a piece of paper from the diary at the end of the show. And I guess people were coming in and out of the audience, but that was just kind of more like a regular theatrical staging. And so, yeah, I was like, and I'm sure you've had those experiences before too, where something is maybe marketed as immersive, but then when you get there, it's not quite that.
Yeah. How immersive is this piece?
Totally, yeah. And so I kind of was interested in diving into if immersive had just become more buzzword than actual art. And so because I know we have the Off Center here, run by the Denver Center, but then there's a lot of, and I quote Amanda Berg-Wilson here, who's the artistic director of the Catamounts and a frequent off-center collaborator, scrappy companies that pick up the slack in between off-center productions. And so those groups include the Catamounts, of course, Audacious Theater, Elevate Immersive, Control Group Productions, and Odd Knot Productions, who all do kind of work of varying degrees of immersive.
Oh, and also Band of Toughs. They come around every year or three with a show. They just had one that was pretty immersive. So
totally.
So following up on what we were talking about before is like, what is immersive and what counts? You know, like what degree is something immersive? Is it like Disneyland immersive, where you're posing with the characters, selfie museums, Casa Bonita? Where do you draw the line? And and also, what's the difference between immersive and interactive?
That was the first question that I asked all of the people whom I interviewed for the piece. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page when we were discussing immersive. So I spoke with about over a dozen immersive producers and creatives, including people like Lonnie Hanson, to Off Center's Charlie Miller and Courtney Azaka, to Meow Wolf leadership, to people in the haunted house community, to just kind of get a really diverse range of ideas about what immersive is and the kind of the scope of the community. But the first thing I realized when I started reporting that just asking that question, what is immersive, is very divisive. A lot of people just don't really want to answer it because they don't want to gatekeep anybody from the art form or prelude people from having a immersive adjacent experience that leads them more into immersive. So people often even contradicted themselves in their own responses. Like they'd set up a boundary to be like, here's what immersive is. And then later in the conversation, they'd say something. And then they'd be like, actually, I want to change my definition of immersive. So it's a very live term. Lonnie, he's kind of immersive elder. He's been doing this since the 80s. He offered a pretty expansive definition that included immersive as having multiple branches, including escape rooms, immersive theater, haunted houses, immersive environments like Meow Wolf, 360 video experiences like immersive Van Gogh, VR and AR experiences, so that's virtual reality and augmented reality, and then ARG experiences, which are I'd never heard of before, but it's augmented reality games, which are more like LARPing and things like that are set up in environments. And then LEBs, which are location-based entertainment experiences like theme parks. So that's your Universal Studios, your Disneylands, your Six Flags, and stuff like that. So just he kind of talked about each of these things as silos that influence the other. And so there's not just one thing that's immersive, it's this whole immersive community.
Wow. Yeah, well, you're on Kim, that really is a wide definition of what falls into it. But, of course, if the show's good, who cares what the actual description of it is. So did anyone else have a more like sort of straightforward description of immersive? Like, this is it, this is what it is, this is what it's not, or anything like that?
So Charlie Miller of Off Center says that they define immersive work as an unexpected theatrical experience that places the audience at the center of the story, needs to be multisensory, and engage more than one and ideally all 5 of your senses. So that was a little bit more straightforward, just talking about the kind of the role that the audience must play in the experience and trying to play with multiple senses rather than just sitting there and only being visually or auditorily appealing.
Okay. And then you talked to David Thomas as well, right?
That's right. So Dave is a professor and co-founder of Immersive Denver, which is a community advocacy group for immersive work and soon to be nonprofit, who defined immersive as being the traditional fine arts funneled through the play aesthetic rather than the beauty aesthetic, which the play aesthetic is established on a certain level of ambiguity that must be resolved through meaning making by the audience. So David doesn't actually have any problem defining immersive Van Gogh or those selfie museums as immersive because audiences actually have to make the meaning of those places for themselves through being there, experiencing them, bringing them to life, rather than having the work explained to them like you might have in a traditional fine arts setting like the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, where they'll have a plaque right next to the work explaining everything.
Uh-huh. I wanted to back up. What is a selfie museum?
So the selfie museum are those kind of like pop-up places where they seem almost just explicitly designed for you to take pictures in. I would define the Museum of Illusions that we have here in Denver as kind of a selfie museum. There's like Museum of Ice Creams that pop up everywhere. There are just like places that even just do market themselves as selfie museums where they're just like cool aesthetic places to take photos in. And there's some people in the immersive community hate those because they often promote themselves as being immersive experiences, which they are in some regard. They're just not quite as immersive and engaging as something like, let's say, what the Off Center does or the Catamounts do in terms of the work being actually interactive.
Yeah, I literally never heard of a selfie museum. I probably wouldn't go to one because I'm the worst selfie taker in the world. I always look like I'm scowling or something. I don't know. It's while I'm trying to like line up the shot. I always have a weird look on my face. So, yeah, it definitely is something that we're seeing a lot more. I mean, of course, the idea itself is probably goes back as far as humans have been around. Around the campfire. It's like, passing a stick around to talk or whatever it is. So when did immersive become sort of like, I don't know, it's sort of this modern iteration?
I mean, you're absolutely right that immersive's been around for a while. I mean, depending on who you talk to, like Amanda Berg Wilson traces it back to its roots in Greek theater, and being much more bacchanalia in nature and very celebratory, which she argues immersive theater is kind of carrying on that tradition of. Lonnie Hands-On traces it back to the Renaissance period and kind of the opera as being a significant driver in the immersive community, as well as I thought this was fascinating, the kind of chapel paintings up on the walls. He was like, imagine being a peasant and not having access to any kind of technology or books or things about how the world looks, and then walking into those Italian chapels that are painted with those beautiful pictures up top. He's like, that is one of the original immersive experiences, because you are utterly transported to a new environment, which I thought was really fascinating. And he actually gave a lecture at Immersive Denver's conference a couple years ago, tracing all the roots of immersive. He links it to everything from like Rocky Horror to Casa Bonita to video games to those selfie museums that we're seeing today to VR technology. So I thought that was interesting. But most creatives I spoke to kind of cited 2016's opening of Sweet and Lucky, which was a co-production between Off Center and the New York City-based Third Rail Project in Denver, as being a watershed moment for immersive in the local community. So I thought that was interesting, that a number of creators, including Amanda and Patrick Mueller over at Control Group, they cited that as being a significant influence in their work. Did you see that production, Alex?
I didn't. The first off-center show I saw was the Wild Party it was at Stanley Marketplace, and I think that was probably like in 2016, 17, something like that. Or it was, it was the first big one of those that I'd seen. It was really cool. It was definitely it was like, wow, this is really something I had done before. But it's interesting when you talk about things like churches and you think about cathedrals and like how that was like, you're immersing your congregation in the world of the religion, whether it's a mosque or a temple or a church or whatever. So that's kind of an interesting way to think about it. And so they would create things like stained glass and beautiful architecture and paintings and all this stuff, so that you would kind of get really immersed in that world to get your religion on. So definitely a newer term that we've heard, but hardly a new art form. So what were some of the reasons that you heard why Colorado might be such a good place for immersive work?
A lot of creators argued that Colorado has been rich in experiences, even if they weren't always defined as immersive experiences. So these are places such as Casa Bonita, the Hall of Life at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, the North Pole experience near Colorado Springs. So the area is just kind of primed for it. Plus, the people who live here are very experience-oriented, like to get out and try new things, which is definitely helpful for immersive work, which is actually asking the audience to participate actively in it. And Ren Manley over at Audacious Theater pointed out that having stoners here also doesn't hurt either, because they're pretty interested to get high and walk around a thing, which I thought was a funny way to put it, but probably pretty true. And then a bunch of people also pointed to the funding environment being right here, mixed with the state having a very entrepreneurial energy, plus Off-Center, Meow Wolf, and the Immersive conferences that have been held here, first by Immersive Denver and then hosted by Off-Center last year, were also big drivers of the growth to Denver as being kind of a hub for the immersive community around the country.
Yeah, well, that definitely makes sense. Conditions here in Colorado are right for it. And there's some big companies making significant investments, including the $40 million renovation of Casa Bonita, which has really leaned back into the immersive world building aspect. There was, back in the day, they still had some of that, but I think it's even more pronounced there. So do things like Casa Bonita and Meow Wolf make it easier or harder for smaller companies to get audience to understand immersive?
That was really another divisive question. Everybody has a kind of an opinion on the working conditions and management of those organizations. And so a lot of people had separate comments about kind of the working conditions that those kind of more corporate environments have. But most of the kind of creators pointed to that it made it easier for audiences to understand what actually immersive is, and from a marketing perspective, it makes it more simple for people to get what's actually going on. However, as we've kind of previously discussed on the podcast, one of the most important areas for improvement is that audience training and ensuring that the role of the audience in immersive experiences is clear, because there's often a lot of confusion around exactly what you're supposed to do in these immersive worlds. But Meow Wolf and Casa Bonita are certainly making it a little bit easier for people to kind of connect the dots.
Uh-huh. Yeah, like we mentioned in the recent pod when I took my wife to After the End, the Catamounts show, one of the things that she said, I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, and it made me kind of uncomfortable. So, that's something that maybe needs to be addressed, but it's tricky.
Yeah, Amanda, who mentioned that in the feedback that they got for that experience, a lot of people noted that it was their first time doing anything immersive. And while they enjoyed it, they kind of had a similar experience to Jenn, where they were a bit confused on what exactly to do, how to participate, what their role was. And she really argued that far fewer people actually understand immersive experiences and how to engage with them than theater professionals would like to admit, which I thought was a pretty interesting argument because to us, it's kind of immersive is kind of, we see it all the time, or I know I do. I'm constantly at immersive experiences and things of that nature. But for like a regular audience member, maybe that's not quite the case.
Yeah, I think that's true. Defining immersive as a whole is a bit inside baseball, and most people will just evaluate it on whether or not it moved them or they were entertained, they liked it. But how do you juggle wanting people to be comfortable with wanting to surprise them as well? So it seems like maybe you could have a pre-show tip or a chat or something like that, but that could weaken the experience too. So maybe there's just certain, like we pointed out, it's like maybe immersive's not for you if you go to one and just like, I don't know, it makes me feel weird.
That was something that people pointed out as well, is like the haunted house community. It's very clear they're not trying to win over people who hate haunted houses. There are some people who like haunted houses, and there are some people who hate haunted houses and will never go to them. The haunted community is not marketing to people who hate scary things. They're marketing to those people who love to get spooked. They love spooky season, and they have been able to be quite profitable. The haunted house community and the escape room community are two of the more lucrative sides of the immersive community, but that's not always true, because a lot of the groups I talked to, particularly the smaller and more nonprofit groups, noted that money and space are their two biggest issues, because creating immersive experiences is incredibly expensive. And given that most of these experiences are kind of geared towards smaller audiences, that doesn't really allow for you to recoup on your investment in these shows, because you can't have a big audience with big ticket sales unless you charge a lot for your tickets, which sometimes works and sometimes backfires. So it's really hard for even the most successful shows to be profitable. For instance, Theater of the Mind, which Off Center co-created with David Byrne for $4 million in 2022, drew over 42,000 people across nearly 3,000 performances. But it was produced under a nonprofit model, meaning that ticket sales alone did not cover the total production cost of that show.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of money to throw at a show. I can see why, for financial reasons, Off Center is going to kind of skinny it down their production schedule.
Yeah, that was what Charlie Miller pointed to as well. It was like, as much as he'd like to do a bunch of homegrown productions every year, it's just not feasible because of cost and the human resources each show requires. You may have already noticed this, and that's why they've been bringing in more imports like Space Explorers, The Infinite, Dark Field, and the upcoming Monopoly Life-Size Travel Edition. And after 4 years in Colorado, Off Center is going to be touring one of its original productions, Lonnie Hansen's Camp Christmas, to another city at this time, which it's not been announced which city, but that will be coming coming soon. But this touring model is going to be what they do for all their productions going forward, because this is kind of part of Charlie's vision to establish a national touring model of immersive work akin to Broadway tours as part of its effort to recoup the cost of these expensive productions. So you can't really make that up just if you stay in one location. There's kind of a cap on how many people will attend an immersive experience, and people don't tend to repeat them. And so by taking them to new markets, you can potentially make up the cost of the shows, or at least that's the theory.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I could see Camp Christmas doing really well.
The only issues was that a lot of these other markets don't have as much exposure or understanding of what immersive is. So Charlie and Lonnie were both talking about the challenges of working with this other city to do their first tented immersive experience. Lonnie was like, it's so interesting to talk to people who don't have that understanding of what immersive is and have to kind of explain to them why it has to be gated, what you have to do in order to ensure it's successful, because they're just not equipped in the language.
Uh-huh. What about like the space? So you talked about a tented thing, but what else are they? Where else are they producing these things?
Well, pretty much every company I talked to mentioned space as being one of the biggest cost and toughest challenges to producing a show. Um, Off Center is going to be attempting to solve this problem by they're renting a space on South Broadway for the next 2 years. That's where they're going to be producing Monopoly Life Size and every other show that they do for the
Okay.
next 2 years. But then that's not a permanent space. It's going to be torn down and transformed into something else. So they're looking for a permanent space to do immersive work. However, not every company has the budget to buy or rent a building like the DCPA does. So there's rumors of two immersive spaces on their way in the Denver area, but nothing's been officially announced yet, so I can't share any more details. But in the meantime, creatives have had to kind of get creative with city-owned spaces, unused office buildings, and site-specific works on farms and in the woods. But even despite these kind of space challenges, I really don't see immersive going away anytime soon. I kind of think we're not going to go back.
If you want to learn more about this, check out Tony's stories on Westword's website now, or pick up the Fall Arts Guide, which is on Westword racks throughout the Denver metro area. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, this week's Colorado headliners and Tony's conversation with Jenn Zuko from Blue Dime Cabaret. So stick around; we'll be right back.
OnStage Colorado was brought to you by the Colorado Fine Arts Center at Colorado College. Their season opens with Dial M for Murder, a new version of the celebrated murder mystery that inspired Alfred Hitchcock's movie masterpiece. Running through October 6th, tickets at fac.coloradocollege.edu. We're also sponsored by the Arvada Center, whose new season is now underway with the musical Waitress playing through October 13th, and Dracula, a feminist revenge fantasy, really, opening September 27th and running through November 3rd. Tickets at arvadacenter.org. And support for OnStage Colorado comes from the Boulder Ensemble Theater Company, whose upcoming season kicks off September 26th with Henrik Ibsen's Enemy of the People, adapted by Mark Reagan. The show runs through October 13th at the Denver Savoy and November 8th through 17th at the Dairy Center in Boulder. Tickets at betc.org. And we also receive support from the Newman Center at the University of Denver, whose Newman Center Presents season starts soon and includes Martha Redbone's show Bone Hill on September 25th. The production is a song cycle inspired by Redbone's life and the women she descended from. Tickets at newmancenterpresents.com.
All right, we're back and ready to let loose with this week's Colorado headliners as we move even further into September. So these are some of the upcoming shows around the state that we're looking forward to in no particular order. What's your first headliner this week, Tony?
My first headliner is from Candlelight Dinner Playhouse in Johnstown, Colorado. It's Always Patsy Cline. This is based on the true events and enduring friendship between Patsy Cline and one of her enduring fans. The show's title was inspired by Cline's numerous letters, which she signed, "Love Always, Patsy Cline." This musical was originally supposed to be produced in 2020 by the company, but was rescheduled until now for obvious pandemic-related reasons. So looking forward to checking this one out. That one runs September 17th through November 10th. So in classic Candlelight fashion, you've got a long time to see this one.
My first headliner is a company we've mentioned before, Adam's Mystery Playhouse. So they're doing something. I love this title. It's like they took all of the several words from like a scary movie and threw them all together. It's Murder at Haunted Blood Mansion. How does blood get haunted? I don't know. This is a dinner theater, very light entertainment. It runs through November 10th, and it's usually fun to get out there. And it's a good one for spooky season.
Yeah. Another vaguely spooky, but I guess more crime-related, is Vintage Theater's upcoming production of Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, which is in Aurora, Colorado, and runs from September 20th through October 20th. So the plot revolves around retired Belgian police officer Hercule Poirot with his signature mustache as he works meticulously to solve the murder of an American tycoon. This adaptation is penned by Ken Ludwig and directed by artistic director Bernie Cardell, who notes that they've never produced anything by Agatha Christie before, so it's a first for Vintage, and the first time Murder on the Orient Express has been produced in the Aurora area.
Really? Okay. Well, if that's not enough murder for you, in Colorado Springs, they're doing Dial M for Murder at the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center at Colorado College. Longest title for a venue, I think, in all of the theaters around here. And that is running September 19th through October 6th. So this, of course, is a adaptation of the Hitchcock thriller. I don't know much about it. I've never seen it.
I've also never seen it, which makes me really interested. Maybe I should make the drive to Colorado Springs. As Springs Ensemble Theater also has something interesting coming up that I want to check out. So maybe make it a double day in the Springs.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think April took our reviewer in the Springs is going to check that out. So we'll have a review of that when it comes up.
Cool. Also continuing the spooky vibes in Boulder, Arts in the Open invites you to join them on the trail as it explores stories that reveal how dark the forest can be in their production of Wicked Wanderings in Chautauqua Park, September 21st through October 27th. So this Boulder-based troupe adheres to the 7 principles of leave no trace and reduce, reuse, and recycle when possible when producing its theatrical hikes in the park there. These are really fun experiences. They're usually pretty family friendly, and you take about 1.5 mile, 2 mile walk just up the side of a mountain where they do scenes. So Wicked Wanderings looks to be a fun extension of that. So catch that through October 27th.
Yeah, I love the title. My next headliner is one that we've talked about before, but it's being restaged. This is the Bluebird from Theater Artibus, and Millabo Art Theater is hosting another weekend of the show, September 19th through 22nd. So this is like something you have never seen before. It's a one-man show. There's not really any dialogue at all. It's a story about a migrant's journey. Really neat show, really quite inventive. And so if you didn't catch it when it was in Denver at the Savoy, this is another opportunity for you down at Millabo in the Springs.
That's amazing to hear that it's being restaged. I mean, just such a captivating production. So
yeah.
My next headliner pick is the Rocky Horror Show, which you either love it or you hate it. But it's pretty hard to avoid Rocky Horror, especially around the spooky season. This musical about an alien from the planet of transsexual Transylvania creating a man in a castle might sound like the start of an unhinged Donald Trump debate answer, but it's actually the plot of Richard O'Brien's rock opera love letter to monster movies in the 1950s and 60s. This is 2 Cent Lion's 7th production since it was started in 2022 by 3 DU students, and it's their first musical. With a $22,000 budget, it's also their most expensive production to date, and it's kicking off the spooky season's annual productions of Rocky Horror. So you can catch the Rocky Horror Show by 2 Cent Lion at the People's Building in Aurora from September 21st through October 3rd.
Yeah, one of several productions of this show and other Rocky Horror type things that'll be around. So we are actually thinking about doing a Rocky Horror episode to talk about all of these shows. So stand by, hang on for that. My next headliner is Enemy of the People at Boulder Ensemble Theater Company. It will be at the Denver Savoy September 26th through October 13th. We've mentioned this before, but it's getting ready to open here. So this is a Henrik Ibsen play about a doctor who just sounds a lot like Anthony Fauci, discovers a healthcare emergency and is vilified by politicians, libeled by a corrupt news media, and shunned by a gullible citizenry. So will he stand up for the truth? And so Mark Reagan there at Betsy sliced and diced this thing. I think cut a fair amount out of it just to make it not 3 hours long. So and then I think also you will probably find some deals on getting to this show. And I think for the preview on September 26th, there's going to be drinks and desserts and stuff. So if you want to go, that would be a good place to check it out.
My final headliner for this week is Kimberly Akimbo. This will be at the Buell Theater and the Denver Performing Arts Complex. And this is the Broadway National Tour launch of this Tony Award-winning musical about growing up and growing old. So after its successful run in NYC, the show has chosen to launch its national tour here in Denver, which is pretty exciting. So the story follows Kimberly, who is about to turn 16 and recently moved with her family to a new town in suburban New Jersey, where she navigates family dysfunction, a rare fatal disease that causes premature aging, her first crush, crush, and possible felony charges. So all this and more in a musical comedy at the Buell Theater, September 22nd through October 5th.
All right, my last headliner is Devil's Crush at Wonderbound. This is a dance company in Denver, and I'm mentioning this one early because they typically sell out all of their shows. And I did check their site, and they still have some seats, but they're going fast. So this is October 17th through 27th, and it's I love this premise. Forced to walk the earth as a mortal, Lucifer must navigate humanity's quirks and complexities. All right, that's the headliners for the week. Also, new and upcoming reviews on the OnStage Colorado website include Bad Jews at Wheat Ridge, Run for Your Wife from Sharkbox Theater, The Critic from 1023 Productions, Toni and mine take on A Night at Rise comedy, God of Carnage at Springs Ensemble Theater Company, we'll be at Hamlet at the Denver Center, The Pillow Man, also from Miscreant Theater Company, Dial M for Murder, we'll have that review, and a lot more. And I was just looking, we still have, even after all these, we still have 15 more reviews coming in September. So it is a busy month.
Wow.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, sit back, relax, and enjoy Toni's conversation with Jenn Zuko of Blue Dime Cabaret, which starts now.
Today, I am joined by the great Jenn Zuko, a.k.a. Valkyrie Rose of Blue Dime Cabaret. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. First time here on the OnStage Colorado podcast, and I'm excited to chat with you a little bit about the art form that is cabaret. That's the name of your game. So
yes.
I guess to just kind of get everybody on the same page, what is the definition of cabaret? What makes it different than burlesque or drag or any other kind of performance?
Well, it's different and it's the same. It's different in that we are not only burlesque or drag. There are a lot of little burlesque companies around Colorado, and there are lots of drag groups that do lots of different events, and it's all great. It's a very, very rich community here in Colorado, actually. I'm loving it. But cabaret is more like old school vaudeville, if you know what I mean by that. It's more of a variety show. We always try and have an eclectic mix of way different kinds of acts. We very rarely have any show. I'm the casting director for Blue Dime Cabaret, and I cast each show fresh. So we don't have a resident company or troupe necessarily. I cast each show afresh, and it's really rare that we have a show that's all burlesque or that's all drag. Even that's all both. Usually we have something very unusual in the mix with that. So it's not just drag, it's not just burlesque, it's a variety. So I think of it as like an old school vaudeville show, or like a very old, I guess like even in the beginnings of variety shows on TV, just the very strange eclectic mix of different things that you'll find. Normally you'll find stuff that we have on our stages. We have a couple stand-up comedians that like to come and perform with us. We have burlesque and drag, of course. We always do have that. We have live music. Sometimes we even have original music happening. We have a magician who is a former student of mine who likes to come and perform tricks whenever he has it in his schedule. What else have we had? We've had aerial dance. We've had acro yoga. We've had contortion. We've had an opera. We have a new opera singer who likes to do opera songs for us. We have had a cosplayer before do a sort of both singing with showing off the actual designs that she designed herself. We have two people who are local fashion designers. So sometimes we'll have a little micro fashion runway to show off those designs. So we have all kinds of art. We even had comedy sketches before. I actually did a comedic monologue at one point where I opened our back to school show with an old Rowan Atkinson bit. So it's a very strange, wacky, quirky, zany, provocative mix of different things. So
yeah, it sounds like it really runs the gambit in terms of what type of performers are featured on the stage there. And how do you kind of weave this all together? And about how long does a typical Blue Dime Cabaret show last?
We weave it together. These days, I put up audition forms and I get lots and lots of amazingly talented people auditioning. Back in the day when we first started in 2018, I've been in the theater scene in Colorado for about 30 years. I'm a fight director, and lately I've also been an intimacy coordinator, but my main focus was in theater and in fight direction. So I happened to have a couple ins in not only from my teaching experience, but I had some theatrical ins that were different from the burlesque ins. But then we also had burlesque ins. So that's how it started. It was just this word of mouth thing. I'm like, hey, bring this weird sketch that you have up on our stage. And hey, you're an improv person, come and do this. So that started very, very grassroots like that. But nowadays, what I do is I put up an audition form and I have acts from all over Colorado and sometimes outside of Colorado audition with their amazing, strange, wonderful, unusual acts. It's just been a delight. This past audition, I auditioned for both our shows in October and November. I had about 30 people audition for both those shows. Now, each show usually has between 9 and 10 acts scheduled, which is about a little bit over an hour of a show, because we also have our MC Bella Fire likes to use the audience, lots of audience participation. We call them shenanigans. So she gets audience members up to do all kinds of crazy things on our stage. And we have a couple little breaks in between. So usually the show is about a little bit over an hour, maybe a little longer, depending on how long we're partying with our audience members. But yeah, it's between 9 and 10 acts each. So
cool. And talk to me about this name. It's a really interesting name, Blue Dime Cabaret. What does it mean? How did you come to this name?
Yeah, I have to give my co-producer Brandy all the credit for coming up with that name. It's this brilliant name, conglomerated together from a lot of different old school vaudeville type folklore, basically, or lore, or actual law in some cases. So the dime is the easiest one to explain. A dime piece or a dime is someone who is a 10.
Oh, got you.
Right.
Yeah.
So scare quotes 10. If you're 10, then you're gorgeous. So we're all dime. It's a blue dime. The blue thing I'll explain in a minute. But so anyone who's ever performed for us before on our stage is a dime piece automatically. So if you've ever
love
been
that
on our
honorary
stage,
name. You perform with Blue Dime Cabaret. You get upgraded in life to a dime piece.
You're a dime piece from now on. You are, yes, indeed. So that's where the dime comes from. And also kind of the idea of the dime novel, or like the pulp sort of dime kind of thing too, from back in the vaudeville days. Blue refers to a few different things. The first thing that might pop into mind are the blue laws, especially if you know anything about sort of adult acts in Colorado. The blue laws refer to how far you're allowed to strip if you're performing in a space that sells alcohol versus not, versus all that kind of stuff. But the blue law, called a blue law from back in the vaudeville days, when an act that would be a little bit too ribald, a little bit too saucy, would get a blue envelope with a little warning inside. So next time you got to bring it back a little bit, make it a little bit tamer. That was a little too far. So that the blue envelopes, and actually my co-producer Brandy has made these little blue envelopes for our shows where people can stick their tips into the blue envelopes. So of course we make all kinds of put your tip in the flap jokes and stuff like that too.
Of course.
So
I mean, it's right there.
It's right there. There it is. Yeah.
And it sounds like you're kind of reappropriating the Blue Dime label a little bit there.
Yeah.
It used to maybe be a bit more of a negative thing, but now it's where you get the money.
And there was one more detail about the blue thing, which I did not know until recently, when our MC Bella Fire brought this historical tidbit up, which I really love. The blue thing. There was a blue light that they would place in the back of a theater back in the vaudeville days. And if the blue light was on, you knew as a performer that the police were going to be attending the show. And so you would want to maybe have your PG-13 version of your act instead of the XXX version of your act ready to go when that blue light went on. So I thought that was a great historical tidbit. So altogether, we are Blue Dime Cabaret, and that's our vibe. We really are very strange and quirky and zany, and we're wanting to really evoke that kind of old school vaudeville sort of feel. And that's why we're
Totally.
excited for our new venue. Liquor Pie is a speakeasy. It has this real speakeasy kind of feel to it. And so we feel like that's a real good match for the kinds of shows that we put on.
Yeah, I absolutely want to come back and talk a little bit more about Liquor Pie over in Westminster, where you'll be performing your upcoming shows for the rest of the year. But first, I want to go back to 2018. So Jenn, you've been very active in the Colorado theater community before this, up to this point.
I had been in theater for a long time, like I said, since the Pleistocene era, basically. And I had joined burlesque. I had got into the burlesque scene in Boulder, in particular, in 2016 is when I joined it. I think Brandy did it separately a little, like around that same time. We had been doing burlesque for a couple of years, and we'd had a couple kind of frustrating experiences with other groups around. And then we decided, it's just one day, Brandy turned to me, my co-producer, and became my co-producer right then. She just turned to me after our frustrating experiences that we were talking about and said, "Hey, do you just want to start a group? Us? Do you want to let's make our own group?" I was like, "Oh, heck yes. Heck yeah, let's start our own group." So it just started very grassroots. And our first show was actually, we happened to get in the lottery for that year's Boulder International Fringe Festival. And so we had a week booked for the Boulder International Fringe Festival of 2018. That was our first series of shows that we ever did. Right after our technically first show, which actually happened at Full Cycle Bar and Cafe, back when it was
also
down
in
on
Boulder.
Also in Boulder, back was on Pearl Street Mall. And that was our very, very first show. And so we cobbled that together. We had some person on their laptop doing each song in a row. I don't even remember how we gathered all the acts, songs. We had a couple people with cute bras and roller skates skating around Pearl Street Mall trying to get people to walk in. And that was just how it started. And ever since then, we had a brief hiatus, of course, during the lockdown part of the pandemic, when live theater in general wasn't happening. So, but after that, we came right back. We just hit the ground running. And I think the one show we came back to in 2021 after our hiatus was sold out immediately. I think people were really, really ready to have this kind of strange, wonderful live experience again after that awful time that we all shared.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If people want to come back, this is this is a very low stakes, interactive way to kind of get back and engage. That makes a lot of sense to me. There were a lot of early takers. A lot of early takers, and I actually had we had a couple little knots of fan following that happened when we performed a few times at a theater in Denver. We performed a few times at Full Cycle. We performed, of course, at Deviate for a while, which you and I have talked about before in different circumstances. We actually had this 2 little fan groups that would follow us to every show at Deviate for a while there. But I'm actually surprised by how many people in the audience raise their hand when the MC asks who's never been to something like this before. There's still a lot of real fresh faces there in our audiences, and they always come up to me in particular afterwards, and they kind of grab me with a stunned look on their face. They're like, "This is the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. What is this?" I'm like, "This is magic. This is cabaret. Yeah. Life is a cabaret, old chum." So the theater kid in you is still there, Jenn.
It is.
I hear it just came out there.
I've actually
Blue Dime
sang that. I've sang that as a cold open a couple times before for our show.
Have not. Oh my! That's too good.
I have.
So, as you kind of listeners, you may have picked up on this already through our conversation, but Blue Dime is a pop-up cabaret troupe, meaning that there's not one permanent location that Blue Dime has kind of been at. So they've been popping around all over Full Cycle, some places in Denver. But you were at Deviate Distillery for a while. Could you talk a little bit about how that connection got made and what it means to you now that the organization in Boulder, which is Boulder's only queer bar, has temporarily shut its doors?
Yeah, we found that maybe we had hoped and thought at the time that maybe once we found Deviate that we were no longer a pop-up cabaret, that we had now found our new home.
Hmm.
So I was looking for, we had been popping around a bunch of different places in Denver. We had done places like Herman's Hideaway and Dangerous Theater, a couple other places around, but we were looking for a place that was really, really matched with our vibe and that we could rely on, that we could go to each time. And I was trying to find a venue in Boulder, particularly because we always like to perform at least one show for Boulder Arts Week, which happens each spring in Boulder. So I was very, very interested in finding a place in Boulder that we could at least do our Boulder Arts Week show at. And that's when I was looking around Boulder and I found Deviate Distillery. And they said, I think that must have been 2022.
Mm-hmm. Or
I think
2022, 2023.
2023 because 2024 was our 1 year anniversary there. Yeah, so it was 2023 was our maybe the end of 22. Anyway, it was around there. We were there for just over a year before they closed their doors. So so I found them for that Boulder Arts Week production that we did with them. We packed the house very tight, and they were like, "So, how about those other shows that you had scheduled at those Denver places? How about you don't schedule them there? How about you schedule them here?" And we're like, you know what? You're absolutely right. So we started making our home at Deviate. So we had one show a month. That's usually how we schedule our shows. We do about one a month. Usually it's second Fridays, but it depends on all kinds of other events going on around town. Especially they have big Denver burlesque conferences and festivals that we kind of tried to not worry about competing with and stuff like that. But we were at Deviate once a month until just recently. It was about a few days before our August 9th show that we heard that they were shutting their doors and canceling everything. So we had to make a very quick scramble to find a new venue. And that's how we came across Liquor Pie.
Totally. But I guess not first before you had a little bit of a full circle moment at Full Cycle.
We did. We had a mad scramble, and it took us, as I was telling you, Toni, before, I like to pat myself on the shoulder because it took us probably about 48 hours to madly scramble and find a place that was able to book us. Because venues like that, they have their events booked at least a couple months in advance. So to have us being like, "Hi, we have a show in 5 days. What do you think?" So Full Cycle, we came Full Cycle, like you said, to Full Cycle, which was one of our very earliest venues. And they had their jazz supper club set up all ready to go, and they had a cancellation. So we just squeaked our way in there, and we did that. And so after that, though, we wanted to make sure we weren't so stressed out. Not only am I casting the next couple of shows, but like to have to cast to the venue as well was a lot of sort of uncertainty. So it was nice to get the solid booking from Liquor Pie for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 shows for the rest of the year.
Yeah, so that'll be Blue Dime Cabaret's home at least through the rest of 2024.
Yep.
Your upcoming show, could you talk a little bit about that? It's happening on September 20th. It's called Blue Dime Cabaret Presents Roll for Your Life. So
that's right.
Well, what can attendees expect if they patron the show?
Well, after having just said that we are not a burlesque only show or a drag only show, this show is one of the very, very rare exceptions. And the reason it is a rare exception is because of the wild and the zany structure that we have chosen to do for this particular show only. In October, we're going to go back to our crazy variety with all the different types of acts. But for this one, we have only burlesque and draglesque acts performing. And the reason for that is that we are going to do what's called, sometimes burlesque scene calls it a roulette style show. Sometimes they call it a kamikaze style show.
Okay,
But the basic,
you've definitely got to say more. You've got my
Yes.
interest so piqued.
I will. So the premise, and this is insane, and this is why it's only burlesque, because you'll hear why this is much easier to do this way. The premise with this is that I have a giant 20-sided die, and our amazing sound guy, Dirty Max, has a playlist of 20 songs, which the four of us, Dirty Max, Brandy, my co-producer, me, and our MC Bella Fire, we all came up with 5 songs that we thought would be good for burlesque. We all gave them to Max. Max has them all in a playlist, and I have a 20-sided die that's giant. What's going to happen is all of our performers are going to show up on the stage, and either they or an audience member is going to roll that 20-sided, the D20 of destiny is what we're starting to call it. They're going to roll that die. Whatever number comes up will be the number of the song on the playlist that Dirty Max will then play. So none of our performers have any idea what song they're going to be performing to that night. Now, to be fair, and this is kind of against my own theater kid thing, to me, like, improv is improv, but the premise in burlesque, though, is to share the entire playlist with the group ahead of time, so they at least know what the playlist is. They're not going to know what number is to what song, but they're going to know at least this is the pool that we'll be rolling from. So they're not.
These are the options.
They're not fully clueless. I was like, what do you mean? Can't we just not tell anybody? And they're like, no, that's not how it works. Jen, this is not improv theater. This is burlesque. I'm like, okay. So that's the idea. This is what's called a roulette show. We're calling it Roll for Your Life, because that's what's going to be happening. So none of our performers are going to know what song they're going to be performing to. They're just going to have to bring some costume pieces, and we'll go from there. And we have one caveat, which is that each performer is also going to bring a random prop with them to the show, and we're going to put them all in a pool. And so if the song starts, they roll the die, the song starts, and they're just like, I'm sorry, I can't. This just pass. Can I pass? They'll be allowed one pass, but that means that their penalty is going to be to pick one of the props out of the common prop pile that we're going to have, and they're going to have to incorporate that prop into the next song, whatever the next song is that they select. So that's the setup, and that's why we have burlesque and draglesque only, because we figured that's a lot easier.
Yeah, you've already got a lot of moving parts, it sounds like, in this show. It's at least with if everybody is on the same page performance wise, that makes the process a little bit easier. But yeah, okay. Very exciting. So, and that'll be your first show, Blue Dime Cabaret's first show over at Liquor Pie, kicking off the first of 4 shows that'll happen in that space through the end of the year. So
Correct.
If you are interested in checking out this performance, you can go ahead and get your tickets now for the show. It's on Friday, September 20th. Liquor Pie, find more information about it at Blue Dime Cabaret's website.
That's right. You can find it at our Instagram or our Facebook, or at Liquor Pie's Speakeasy events calendar too. There's ticket links at all those places.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for coming on the OnStage Colorado podcast today to chat with me a little bit about the art of cabaret and the work that you're doing over at Blue Dime Cabaret.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a delight.
All right, that's it for now. Well, that was a really interesting conversation with Jen. I had no idea what the term blue meant in the context of cabaret performance and all those different types of performance on stage. It sounded like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been to one of their shows before when they were over at DV8 and Boulder, and I really enjoyed getting to see Blue Dime in their element. So next week on the podcast, we're going to have your conversation with Max Schulman about TheaterWorks' production of Henry 4 and 5. So what can you tell us about that interview?
Max was great to talk to. A lot of those Shakespeare histories don't get done because they can be kind of dense and long. And so his solution was to sort of take the best parts of the Henry cycle, the 3 plays, and mash it into one. So that's about 2.5 hours long. So he talks about that, how he came to the project. And he also helped me understand something I've never quite figured out, Toni, and that's what TheaterWorks is and how it works within and alongside the University of Colorado Springs Theater Program.
So if you want to hear Alex's interview with Max about Henry 4 and 5 and how theater works, as well as our conversation about Rocky Horror's history next week. Be sure to subscribe to the OnStage Colorado podcast wherever you get your audio stuff so you don't miss a second of the podcast. And be sure to let other theater lovers in your life know what we're doing here.
Yep, and be sure to check out all the reviews, news, other podcast episodes, and our full statewide theater calendar on the website at OnStage Colorado.
Please rate the show wherever you're listening now. We'd really love to hear your thoughts. Reviews help us get the word out about what we're doing. And if you leave a written review, we may just read it here on the show. If you want to get in contact with us, please email us at info@OnStageColorado or leave a comment on social media or our website. Good, bad, or ugly, we always love to hear from you.
Yep. Well, all right. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Toni Tresca. We'll see you at the show.
Yeah.